Maybe. I don't know. You can echo at the end if you want to save it or something. Hello, everybody. You're probably here because most of you have lost to a counterplan at one time or another, or you have wanted to write your own at one time or another and wanted to know what it is these affirmatives keep thinking when they're beating you. So I have a variety of strategies, some simple templates for how you can take down the counterplan pretty effectively. More than anything, I always say that the rules are the most helpful because they give you direct access to how a ballot is to be interpreted. And the rules give pretty clear definitions on how counterplans or counterproposals, as it says, should be run and what's required of them to be accepted. And it also has some different little notes on how counterplans interact with other arguments in the round. So if you go through the charter, here's some requirements that it has to meet. The first is it has to be non-topical. There are further reasons, for further warrants for that sort of thing. The first would probably be because ballot advocacy requires it. Wording of ballots usually says that the affirmative team has won or the negative team has won. So if both people are arguing to affirm the resolution, then even if they win the argument, the judge is stuck writing affirm has won. They've switched sides. But more than that, a lot of the warrants come from preserving ground in the first place and debatability in that sense. If you're both arguing for the resolution, it kind of diffuses clash. So that's another functional element of it. Second requirement is that a counterplan has to be competitive. There are a couple ways that it has to be competitive. Well, it could be mutual exclusivity and or net benefits. Now, when they say mutual exclusivity, that means that the two can't operate in tandem for some reason or another. Because remember, they're proposing a counterplan as evidence for why the affirmative plan shouldn't be rejected or the resolution shouldn't be advocated. A lot of times people will show it by net benefit, and net benefit is the advantage that the counterplan holds over the affirmative plan. It's quite likely that two plans can coexist, but the counterplan won't trigger a disadvantage, and the plan alone would. So they might say that they're mutually exclusive by net benefit. But sometimes counterplans can be mutually exclusive in another way. Like last year, for instance, there's a plan to pay $800 million to the Greater Horn of Africa over the global gag rules funding. Okay, that's what plan text would say. A counterplan could have read, repeal the global gag rule. Now you see how those two are functionally mutually exclusive? They both can't coexist. You could say you could do both, but since the plan text says you need the global gag rule, it's referenced. It can't not exist to be referenced in plan and then exist in the counterplan. So that's how they would be mutually exclusive. Now the third requirement involves how it relates to the affirmative plan. The rules make reference of how a counterplan has to meet the same solvency burdens as an affirmative plan. I love to extrapolate all kinds of reciprocity intentions because they're giving you these whole merits on how solvency works. I would say that if the charter says that they have to meet your solvency burdens, why not say that the charter intended on them having the same burdens in other regards? So here are some little tips that I don't think a lot of people use in responding to counterplans. There are probably going to be unique responses that you might give. The first is, counterplan text must be written. You guys, when you run your affirmative, you're expected to write your plan text out, right? As an affirmative, you have to write it out. And negatives would be really upset if you didn't. One thing it does is it prevents you from shifting your ground, shifting your advocacy, and becoming a moving target. Like if I said in my first speech that my plan cost $800 million and then I didn't put it in writing, it's possible I could get out of spending this ad by saying, oh, I only said normal means or something like that. Or it was $800 million in subsidies, not actual payment. So why not require that counterplans have a written text? Now, I would advocate that you do that for a couple of reasons. The first is to lock them in so that they don't have the ability to shift out positions. But the second is to suck their time up. If they didn't write it down, ask them to. They'll have to do it during their prep or before their speech. And if they don't, the judge has seen that there's no written counterplan text in the round, so they lose some degree of credibility there. The other debater, the neg debater, will most likely say that they'll do it, but they'll do it begrudgingly. So the second is they must be given full advocacy. This is debatable. Mark this morning was talking about counterplan theory, and he identified 3 different types of advocacy. Anybody remember what they were?
Dispositional, conditional, and
Unconditional.
Yep, dispositional, conditional, and unconditional, or full advocacy, whichever you want. Now, affirmatives are stuck giving full advocacy the entire round. Why not make the negative do it? If they run a counterplan that is dispositional or conditional, insist that you can do the same. Insist that you can kick your case just as easily and run a new one in the 2AR. Why not? It puts the burden on them for having established a new precedent of not having to defend the advocacy that they make for a plan. And another is that, remember, these counterplans also have to have a form of stock issues involved. Since they have to meet the solvency burden of the affirmatives, it would make sense that they would have to meet some sort of inherency burden, right? Because otherwise there's nothing to prevent their harm from being solved in the status quo. Solvency would be a moot issue if they didn't have an inherent barrier. And lastly, this is another thing, a requirement that you need not bring up. It can be advantageous to you, or it might be detrimental to you. The quote, "Counterproposals should be logically consistent with all other negative arguments constructed during the debate. If inconsistencies arrive and the affirmative points them out, the judge should reject the arguments inconsistent with the counterproposal." Sound good? So if they have a whole bunch of threatening disadvantages, and you point out some kind of inconsistency with those disadvantages, you can make all the DAs go away. That might work against you. Sometimes you want to capture the disadvantages and beat down the counterplan, so that might be your best strategy. Other times you just want to diffuse all the weight that's being hurled at you. But yeah. So when responding to a counterplan, remember that your responses should be strategic. You want a mixture of defense and offense. You want 3 things. You want 1, turns. When I say turns, I mean turns and or disadvantages. It's good. Make them put them on the defensive. The second is ballot access. There are plenty of theoretical arguments that you can make that take about, 5 seconds apiece, and you can potentially win the round so long as one of them goes through. It's a good trade-off. And then the third is, remember to give solid defense of your case's unique advantages. More times than not, an affirmative will beat out a counterplan's claim to solving case advantages, that is, because they can cite unique, specific solvency of their plan being advocated to solve the harm area. Most counterplans' solvency evidence is a blind assertion that states can somehow magically make better policies, or Japan has a lot of technological innovation, so they'll be able to handle it. Those are blind assertions, and your case evidence ought to be good enough in the first place. I mean, you did write a case about it. In your responses, you want to front load and sandbag. The two aren't mutually exclusive.